Why would a prisoner laugh the moment an axe touches his neck? The answer lies in a warrior cult so extreme, historians thought they were a myth for centuries. But to understand that moment, where a man stares death in the face and cracks a joke, we have to go back to a fortress that wasn't supposed to exist. You've probably heard of Vikings as raiders, farmers who grabbed a spear in the summer to go steal some gold. But imagine a group of Vikings who were different, professional, disciplined, a brotherhood that functioned like the Navy SEALs of the 10th century. They were called the Jomsvikings, and if you saw their ships coming, you didn't just hide your silver, you prayed. For a long time, we thought they were just a ghost story, a cool legend the Norse writers made up to sound tough, because the details just seemed too crazy to be real. They supposedly lived in a fortress called Jomsborg, somewhere on the southern coast of the Baltic Sea, maybe modern-day Poland or Germany. And this wasn't a village, it was a military base. The sagas say Jomsborg had a massive harbour that could hide 300 longships behind iron gates. But the craziest part wasn't the architecture, it was the rules. To get inside these walls, you had to leave your humanity at the door. First off, no men under 18, and nobody over 50. This was a fighting force in their physical prime. No old men, no kids. Second, and this is where it gets weird for a Viking society, no women allowed. At all. Not even for a visit. They believed families made you soft, attachments made you hesitate, and hesitation gets you killed. But the most intense rule, fear was illegal. I don't mean you had to be brave. I mean showing fear was grounds for immediate expulsion. If you were a Jomsviking, you didn't flee. You didn't retreat. You avenged your brothers or you died trying. It sounds like a movie script, right? Like something out of 300, but with axes. That's why historians were so skeptical. It's too perfect, too cinematic. Until we started finding the bodies. See, there's a specific kind of grave that pops up in the Viking world. Mass graves. But not just piles of bones. We're talking about skeletons that show signs of violent trauma, but dignified burial. And then there's the teeth. You might have seen this in pop culture, but it's real. We found skulls with horizontal lines filed into their front teeth. They deliberately carved grooves into their enamel and filled them with dye, red or black. Imagine a guy screaming at you on the battlefield, and when he bares his teeth, they're striped with red paint. It's psychological warfare. It says, I can handle the pain of carving my own teeth. What do you think I'm going to do to you? This matches the description of the Jomsvikings perfectly. Men who turned themselves into living weapons. But the legend of the Jomsvikings really hinges on one event. The moment where their no fear rule was put to the ultimate test. The Battle of Hjörungavágr. This is the climax of their story. The Jomsvikings were hired to invade Norway. A massive fleet, heading north to take down a rival earl. The battle was absolute chaos. The sagas say it was so violent that hailstones the size of fists started falling. Some legends even say the earl sacrificed his own son to a goddess to turn the tide of the battle. That's how desperate he was to stop these mercenaries. Eventually, the Jomsvikings were outnumbered. Their fleet was broken. And this is where we get back to that guy laughing at the axe. The survivors were rounded up on a beach. Usually in this time period, if you capture wealthy mercenaries, you ransom them. You sell them back. But you don't ransom a Jomsviking. They sat them down on a log, a long row of defeated warriors, and the executioner started going down the line, chopping off heads one by one. Now, normally, this is the part where people beg. They cry, they panic. But these guys, they treated it like a comedy club. One of them, a guy named Thorkel, looks at the executioner and says, "I only have one request. Don't get my hair bloody." He leans forward, flips his long hair over his head and waits. Just as the axe comes down, he jerks his head back. The axe hits the ground. He looks up and laughs.
"You missed."
Another prisoner, a young guy, maybe 18, says, "I want to know if I can still feel things after my head is off." He grabs a stick. He says, "I'm going to hold this stick. If I drop it when you chop my head off, I'm dead. If I'm still holding it, I'm still conscious." The axe swings. The head flies off. The stick drops. It sounds insane, but think about the psychology here. They lost the battle. They were going to die, but they refused to give the enemy the satisfaction of seeing them break. They won the moral victory by turning their own execution into a joke. For years, people thought, "Okay, cool story, but that never happened." But then, in 2009, archaeologists in Dorset, England, found a pit. RidgeWay Hill. Inside were 54 skeletons, all male, all mostly young, and all of them had been decapitated from the front. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution. But here's the kicker. The heads were piled neatly to one side. The bodies were left where they fell. And isotope analysis showed these weren't locals. They were from Scandinavia. They were big guys, strong, evidence of old wounds that had healed. These were career fighters. And yes, some of them had filed teeth. This mass grave in England looks exactly like the aftermath of a Jomsviking raid gone wrong. It's physical proof that there really were bands of elite, strictly organised Viking mercenaries who stuck together even in death. They found one skeleton where the neck vertebrae were cut at an angle. It suggests the guy flinched? No. It suggests he moved his head specifically to mess with the executioner. Just like the story of the guy with the hair. It's chilling because it validates the horror stories. It means that somewhere in the Baltic there really was a fortress where men trained to turn off their survival instinct. The Jomsvikings represent the extreme end of the Viking Age. Most Vikings were just people looking for better land or quick cash. But the Jomsvikings were an idea. The idea that if you remove fear, if you remove family, if you remove everything that makes you human, you become something stronger. But there's a tragedy in it too, because in the end they didn't conquer the world. They died in a pit in England or on a beach in Norway. Their strict code didn't save them. In fact, it's probably what got them killed. If they had retreated, if they had surrendered, they might have lived. But the code said death before dishonour. So they died. But they died in a way that we're still talking about 1,000 years later. So maybe they got exactly what they wanted. Immortality. Not of the body, but of the name. The Jomsvikings are a reminder that the Viking spirit wasn't just about sailing and raiding. It was about a mindset. A terrifying, brutal, uncompromising mindset. So, knowing what you know now, about the teeth filing, the no women rule, the guarantee that you'd likely die young on a beach somewhere, if you were a young man in the 10th century, with no land and no future, would you have knocked on the gates of Jomsborg? Would you trade your long life for a short, glorious one? Let me know what you choose in the comments below. I'll be reading them.